From the time I can remember, I've always been the kind of person where people feel like they can talk to or vent to about their problems or misfortune. And what's interesting is that up until about a few years ago, I didn't think listening to someone with compassion was a real skill. But then I realized that when people were having conversations with me, they felt much more relaxed and at ease as a result of expressing themselves around me. I got people, so they can just open up and just whatever's on their chest, they can just let it off their chest. And I was always a good listener. What I'm going to share with you is how you could be a good listener to somebody else in case somebody wants to vent to you about their problems or frustrations. Now, the first and most important thing is to listen with empathy. When somebody's feeling guilt, anger, shame, or any kind of a negative emotion, and they come to you to want to vent, and you listen to that person with concern and understanding, that person simply feels heard and understood. And feeling heard and understood, by the way, that's a very strong and powerful emotional need that we all just simply crave whenever we're feeling vulnerable or we're going through a tough time. I mean, just put yourself in this position right here. You just went through a breakup, or you did something that you felt bad about, or you just simply got into an argument with someone and you just felt so angry, and you're looking for somebody who's willing to be a good listener. Now, just imagine how you will feel when somebody's listening to you. They're nodding their head, listening, paying attention to what you're saying, and understanding things from your point of view. And they're listening with concern. Well, chances are you're going to feel much more at ease. I mean, you've probably been through this. I mean, we all been through this at some point. We all wanted to vent to someone else and they was listening. Now, unfortunately, when somebody's listening with concern and understanding, that's not exactly easy to come by, because most people have a tendency of passing judgment, or they have a tendency of giving a lot of unsolicited advice, in which case I'm going to talk about these two things in this video. But if you've been in a position where you felt like you just wanted to vent your frustrations, then you know what it feels like to feel more at ease. Well, I want to encourage you to be that kind of person. And this is not something that you have to be born with. And even though this is something that always came natural to me, it's a natural gift that I have, and I've always displayed that, but you don't have to be born with this. And if you want to listen to somebody with empathy, all you have to do is just try to understand where the other person's coming from, and make sure you understand that they are vulnerable. Now, this right here brings me to my next point. Don't pass judgment on the other person. One thing you got to remember is that when somebody's going through a tough time and they're feeling vulnerable and they're emotionally sensitive at that point, the last thing they want to hear is somebody else telling them, saying, "I told you so," or kicking them while they're down, so to speak, by telling that person that they ought to be ashamed of themselves for feeling the way they feel. And what's going to happen is that person is going to feel they not only have the problem that they're dealing with, now they're coming to somebody else, and that person just making them feel even worse. So when you refuse to pass judgment on somebody, you're helping that person become much more open, much more relaxed and calm. So you listen with empathy, and you also listen to that person without passing any judgment. Now, this final thing I want to mention right here, and this is something that we all been guilty of at some point, and it still goes on. And I've been guilty of this myself too. And that's giving the person a lot of unsolicited advice. I'm talking about the kind of advice that people didn't ask for. Now, when most people give unsolicited advice, the reason why they don't take that advice is because the person that's giving the advice, they're only telling the other person what they themselves would do and how they would solve the problem if they was in that same situation. But the problem is it might not work for that other person. I mean, that's kind of like, giving somebody a prescriptive medication to somebody else that's prescribed just for you. So that's kind of like what it means when you give unsolicited advice to other people. If it comes down to a point where you have to give advice to somebody, and sometimes we just can't help ourselves, but if you have to give advice to somebody else, well, for one thing, I would encourage you not to give it unless they ask for it. But if they don't ask for it and you feel a strong need to want to help that other person, and you want to make a simple suggestion, then make sure you understand the person's values, understand their beliefs, Understand where they're coming from, so that way you can give sound advice that they can at least take in consideration. It's up to them whether they're going to take it or leave it, but make sure you get a chance to know the person if you have to give the other person advice. Now, one thing I always do in my case, instead of me giving a whole lot of advice, because I don't give advice much anymore unless I'm either asked for it or if I feel a need to make a suggestion, that's another thing. But most of the time, what I do is I just get the person just to come up with their own answer. I might ask them questions about how have they solved problems before. And I try to connect them to the state of mind that they had before when they faced either that same challenge, something similar, or maybe something totally different. When you use powerful questioning on other people, you're getting that person to think, come up with their own answers. Because once they come up with their own answers, if you ask the right question, then they feel that they'll not only have the solution to their problems, but also they feel much more superior because they feel like, hey, I came up with this on my own. In which case they had came up with their answer on their own. All you did was ask the right question. All right, so these are the 3 points right here. So I'm gonna go back over this again. When you listen to somebody, listen with compassion. Try to understand where that person's coming from, and just listen. Just pay attention to what that person's saying, and just simply listen. You'd be surprised about how powerful listening can be. And then again, don't pass judgment on that other person. That's the last thing that they want to hear because they're already sensitive. They're already vulnerable. They already went through enough already. Too much for somebody else to be making them feel even worse. And then again, don't give unsolicited advice. But I'm gonna repeat this part again. If you have to give advice, make sure that at least that they ask for it. Or if you have to make a suggestion, get to know the person first before you make any kind of suggestion about how they should solve their problems. All right, so this all I'm gonna leave for you for this evening. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you next time around. Have a good evening.